Let me tell you something right now. Something that should chill every single person who has ever dared to dream big, work hard, and reach for a future that feels just within their grasp. Because right now, under the cloud of political fear and strategy, a storm is brewing. And it's not just threatening systems or companies, it's threatening lives, families, futures, hope. They came with nothing but fire in their hearts. Men and women, brilliant, young, full of vision, who left behind their hometowns, their families, their mother tongues, and dared to believe that America, yes, this land of freedom, would make space for them. They were the coders, the developers, the thinkers, the problem solvers of our generation. They didn't come to sit and wait. They came to build, to contribute, to work, and they did. They created apps that connected families across continents, platforms that helped students learn from remote villages, and digital security systems that protected government data from cyber threats. They worked long hours under fluorescent lights, ate their dinners over keyboards, and rarely took credit for the systems they kept running for all of us. And yet, despite all of that, despite years of service, success, and sacrifice, they are now the first to be cast aside, not because they failed, but because the political winds have shifted. Because one man decided that his path to power would be paved by fear and division. And in that path, these workers, the same ones who helped lift the American tech industry to global dominance, have become the new target, the new villains in a story written not by truth but by strategy. It is one of the greatest betrayals of our time, and it is happening quietly, efficiently, cruelly. You don't see it on the evening news, not every day, but it's there, in the trembling hands that open letters from immigration services, in the inboxes that receive final notice, subject line, in the late-night packing of suitcases, the calls to relatives back home, the children asking why they have to leave their schools, their friends, their futures. This is not a story of illegality. It's a story of displacement, cold, calculated, and devastating. And what makes it even more painful is how silently it's being done. These are not loud deportations. There are no camera crews at the door, no dramatic raids on TV. This is a more insidious kind of cruelty, the kind that happens through broken promises and bureaucratic weapons, the kind that tells people they don't belong, not by shouting it, but by forcing them into corners until they have no choice but to leave. I sat with a woman named Lena from Bangalore. She came to the U.S. on an H-1B visa 10 years ago, got her master's in computer science, and eventually landed a job at a major tech firm. She paid taxes, trained interns, even started a Girls in Tech mentorship program in her community. And just last month, her husband's company filed for a layoff, which technically voided their dependent visa status. That's all it took. One administrative change, one pink slip, and suddenly, their entire life was illegal. Now she wakes up every day wondering if ICE will knock on the door. Her 8-year-old daughter cries every night asking if they'll be sent back to somewhere she doesn't even remember. This, my friends, is the cost of silence, of not asking enough questions, of letting cruelty hide behind bureaucracy. Because what Donald Trump is doing is not just implementing immigration reform, it's implementing fear, and that fear doesn't stay confined to visa holders. It spills into the hearts of everyone watching, every green card applicant, every asylum seeker, every naturalized citizen who wonders if their family will be next. The notices are not just deportation letters, they are weapons. They strip dignity. They erase years of contributions with the stroke of a signature, and they terrify the entire immigrant community into silence, into submission, into despair. It's psychological warfare disguised as policy, and it's working because people are too afraid to speak, too afraid to show up to work, too afraid to call their lawyers, too afraid to drive their kids to school in case it's the last time. This is not the America they believed in. This is not the promise they came for, and it breaks my heart because it should break all of our hearts. And here's the thing, when we let fear lead, when we let fear control, we begin to lose the very soul of this country. Because what happens to Lena and her family, what happens to the thousands of others receiving those cold, hollow notices, it doesn't just affect them, It affects the integrity of the American dream. It weakens our promise to the world. It tells future innovators, scientists, and leaders that their brilliance is conditional, that no matter how hard they work, they will always be guests in a house they helped build. And that brings me to what's happening next, because it doesn't stop with notices. It doesn't end with silence. This fear campaign is growing teeth. It's becoming an instrument of power, a tactic of control, and in many cases, a means to erase people without fingerprints on a public record. And I want to tell you exactly how. Let's talk about the chilling next step in this crackdown, how these notices are being used not just to remove people but to break their spirits, to tear families apart before they even have a chance to defend themselves. And so we must look deeper, not just at the letters, not just at the laws, but at the intention behind them. Because when deportation notices become tools of intimidation instead of justice, we are not looking at immigration policy anymore. We are looking at emotional warfare. These letters don't just say leave, they whisper, "You're not safe." They threaten without ever raising their voice. They are delivered in silence, but they scream in the hearts of those who receive them. I spoke to a young man, Ravi, from New Jersey. He came to America. He went to college here, then graduate school. His thesis won awards. He was hired straight out of school to work at a tech firm, developing AI for medical diagnostics. Imagine this. His code helps detect early stages of cancer. He's saving lives. But he called me in tears last month because he got one of those letters, one delayed signature on a renewal, that's all. And now he's being told his time is up, that his contribution, his service, his intelligence, none of it matters anymore. You tell me, what kind of system is that? What kind of leadership takes a man like Ravi, who's done nothing but give, and treats him like a threat? And what message does that send to everyone else, those who are still working, still waiting, still trying to believe in the promise of this country? It tells them, you are always one mistake away from being erased. And that message isn't just felt in private, it echoes through entire communities. In dorm rooms, people are whispering about deadlines and renewals like they're hiding secrets. In tech offices, workers are walking on eggshells, wondering if their presence is still allowed. And in schools, children are watching their parents fall apart, watching their heroes tremble under the weight of uncertainty. I want you to picture this, a 7-year-old child in San Jose, sitting at the dinner table, overhearing her parents talk in hushed voices. She doesn't understand what H-1B or I-40 means, but she knows something is wrong. She knows something is coming. And when that deportation letter finally arrives, when her parents are packing suitcases instead of school lunches, what do you think she learns about safety, about trust, about home? These notices, they are not just letters, they are invasions. They violate peace, they steal sleep, they crush potential, and they come without compassion, without context, without care for the humans on the receiving end. This is what makes them so insidious. They come dressed as routine paperwork, but their real purpose is control. And I need you to hear me when I say this. Control built on fear is not leadership, it's bullying. And what's worse is how the system is designed to leave people helpless. You can't appeal quickly, you can't get fast answers, you don't have the money for a lawyer, good luck. You don't have time off from work to file documents. Sorry, the clock is ticking, and the fear, it grows, it becomes a living thing inside of you. I asked Ravi what hurt most. He didn't say the threat of deportation, he didn't say the loss of a job. He said, I feel like I'm being erased before I even got to tell my full story. And isn't that the most heartbreaking part, that so many of these bright, hard-working individuals are being written out of the American narrative before they even finish the first chapter? These notices are not policy, they are political performance. They are part of a strategy to remind certain people they are always outsiders. They are made to create tension, to stir fear, to push people into panic. And this panic, it doesn't stay behind closed doors. It spills into boardrooms, into neighborhoods, into our collective consciousness. Because let me tell you, when your neighbors start disappearing, when your coworkers don't show up, and no one talks about it, when your child's best friend suddenly has to move to a country they've never seen, that fear becomes yours too. And that's what this administration is counting on. Silence, disconnection, division. If they can keep us apart, If they can convince us that these people are other, then they win. But here's the truth. These people are us. They are America. They are the dreamers, the builders, the backbone of our digital world. And tearing them away isn't just unjust, it is self-sabotage. And it doesn't stop there, because when you start normalizing fear, when you turn intimidation into administration, it doesn't just hurt individuals, it breaks family. And the very next step in this downward spiral is what we must look at next, because this isn't only about careers lost or jobs threatened, it's about homes dismantled, about families being ripped apart by policies that do not account for love, for sacrifice, for unity. That pain, that quiet kind of suffering takes root in the home, in the hearts of children too young to understand policy, but old enough to feel the shift in the air. That's where this crackdown begins to feel like something darker than politics. It begins to feel like betrayal. And when the fear travels from the front door to the dinner table, it doesn't just change lives, it reshapes families. Because what happens when a parent loses their status isn't just a matter of law, it's a matter of love being put on trial. Suddenly, families are being asked to make the most impossible choices. Do we stay together and face deportation as a unit? Or do we split, one parent staying behind with the children, the other vanishing into uncertainty? I met a woman named Nisha in Seattle. She had worked as a senior back-end engineer for a well-known cloud storage company for 7 years. Her work was admired, her team respected her, and she paid her taxes every single year without fail. Her 2 boys, aged 6 and 9, were both born in Washington state, U.S. citizens. But her H-1B renewal was denied after a technical issue with her employer's documentation, a minor paperwork error with devastating consequences. She was given 60 days to leave the country, so she stood in front of her sons one evening, looked into their confused, hopeful faces, and tried to explain the unexplainable. "Mommy might have to go away for a while," she said. The older one cried, begging her not to leave. The younger one offered to hide her in his closet. And in that moment, I saw what this policy truly does. It breaks down what love has built up. That's what families are facing. One missed detail, one delayed document, one policy shift, and you're no longer a mother, a father, a provider. You're now a case, a removal, a number in a system that does not know your name, your sacrifice, or your worth. This isn't just a political choice, it's a moral failure. Because when you force a parent to choose between their children's safety and their legal status, you are not protecting borders, you are violating bonds. You are forcing people to fracture the most sacred unit of human life, the family. Now imagine what that does to a child's sense of security, a child whose bedtime story is replaced with whispered phone calls to lawyers, a child who walks into school wondering if their mom will still be there when they come home, a child who carries the burden of adult fear without the tools to understand it. What kind of legacy are we creating when that is what our immigration system does? And yet the people at the center of this trauma are still showing up. They are still working, still hoping, still believing that America will remember what it promised them. But their faith is wearing thin. Because merit, the idea that if you work hard, if you contribute, you will be safe, that myth is crumbling under the weight of policy that says otherwise. You see, America used to pride itself on being a meritocracy, that if you're smart, talented, driven, then this country would make space for you. That's the lie so many immigrants were sold. Come with your degrees, your skills, your innovations, we will welcome you. But that door, my friends, is closing fast. And not because the talent isn't there, but because the political will to recognize it no longer is. What we're seeing now is the unraveling of a promise, a broken contract between a nation and the people who believed in it. Because no matter how high you climb, no matter how much you contribute, if you don't have the right piece of paper at the right time, your whole life can be ripped away. And it's not just the people being deported who suffer, it's their co-workers. their neighbors, their community. It's the entire tech sector losing talent that can't be easily replaced. And yes, it's us, the American public, who pay the price for every innovation that never happens. Because a brilliant mind was sent away before it could finish what it started. So what now? What do we say to those who stayed up late debugging code that made your banking safer, your hospital records more secure, your navigation more accurate? What do we say to them when we tell them they're no longer needed, not because of performance but because of paperwork? I'll tell you what we say. We say, you were never really part of the family. That's the message this crackdown sends. That merit doesn't matter, that loyalty doesn't matter, that humanity doesn't matter. And that is what we must confront now. Because when a country begins to abandon merit in favor of fear-driven gatekeeping, it doesn't just lose people, it loses itself. So let's keep walking through this story together. Because what's coming next is not just about the injustice, it's about the hypocrisy, the way this country uses immigrant brilliance and then discards it the moment it's politically convenient. Let's go there, let's speak it, because the truth deserves a voice. And now that we've pulled back the curtain and seen the truth, that merit no longer guarantees belonging, we must talk about what that betrayal really looks like in practice. It's not just about individuals being told they don't matter. It's about entire families being dismantled, piece by painful piece. And I want you to sit with that image. Not just immigrants losing their jobs, but losing their homes, their communities, their sense of security, sometimes overnight. You know, it's one thing to deport a person, but it's another to undo a life. I sat with a father in Chicago, a gentle, soft-spoken man named Naveen. He came here on a skilled worker visa, joined a software firm that contracts with major hospitals across the Midwest. For over a decade, he built internal systems to make patient care faster and safer. Every paycheck he earned, he paid taxes on. Every holiday, he volunteered at his son's school. He believed deeply in the American dream. But last year, that dream slipped away in a cold, government-sealed envelope. His company got acquired. His role was considered redundant. He had 60 days to either find a new sponsor or leave. Let me tell you, 60 days is not enough time to find a new tech job, go through the hiring process, get an offer, and have that company legally process a new visa. So there he was, a man who had poured more than 10 years into the health and safety of this nation's hospitals, being told he needed to uproot his entire life. And what hurt him most wasn't losing his job, it was breaking the news to his wife and their 11-year-old daughter, Anika. Anika is an American citizen. She plays cello in the school orchestra. She wants to be a software engineer like her dad. But when he told her they might be forced to go back to a country she's never even visited, she cried until she couldn't speak. And do you know what she said between? She said, "Why doesn't this country love us back?" Let that sink in. That's the question echoing in so many immigrant homes right now. Why doesn't this country love us back? Because they did everything right. They followed every rule. They waited patiently in decades-long green card backlogs. They raised children who sing the national anthem in school assemblies. And yet, with a single denial, a single expiration, a single silence from the system, their entire world collapses. We are not just talking about job loss. We are talking about children being torn away from schools they grew up in, families being forced to sell homes at a loss, medical treatments being abandoned mid-care because they no longer have insurance, aging parents who were finally brought over after years of waiting, now being left behind again. These are not statistics, these are lives. These are people who sit beside you at the DMV, who bring a dish to the neighborhood potluck, who fix your internet when it's down, who hold your hand in hospital waiting rooms. And it breaks my heart. It truly does, because these families are not trying to game the system. They're trying to stay together. That's it, they're trying to stay whole in a system that is trying to tear them apart for political convenience. They are not the threat, they are the fabric. And yet this administration has used them like pawns in a game of fear. They've told these families, we'll use your talent when we need you, but don't get too comfortable. They've turned legally present into temporarily tolerate. And when your status becomes conditional, your dignity becomes negotiable. That is what makes this crackdown so cruel. It's not just about enforcement. It's about erasure. It's about writing people out of the story they helped build. It's about pretending they were never really here in the first place. And that is not only untrue, it is unjust. We are watching a nation that claims to protect the family unit now stand by as families are ripped apart by bureaucratic technicality. This isn't about who came here legally or illegally. This is about who gets to stay whole and who gets broken down because their roots weren't grown in American soil. But let me tell you this, love does not care about borders, and family is not defined by paperwork. And when a government loses sight of that, when policy becomes more about power than people, it's up to us to speak, to remind this country of what it once promised and what it still owes. Now let's call it what it is. Not just a betrayal, not just a failure of empathy, but a blinding, glaring hypocrisy. Because as we talk about families being broken apart, as we speak the names of the people this policy is erasing, we also have to look at who is profiting from their silence, who is benefiting from their labor while standing quietly by as they're pushed out. Because make no mistake, this country depends on immigrant tech workers every single day, in every city, in every industry. From defense to healthcare, from education to entertainment, immigrants are not on the sidelines, they are at the center. And yet these same industries, these same billion-dollar companies, these same CEOs who sip wine in San Francisco while their workers code until 2 in fluorescent-lit offices, they're not speaking up, they're issuing PR statements and diversity reports, while their HR departments process exit paperwork for the very people who built their platforms. That's not just silence, that's complicity. Let's take Silicon Valley as an example. The world looks at it as the golden beacon of innovation, the land of unicorn startups and technological breakthroughs. But peel back that shiny surface, and you'll find it was built, yes, built, on immigrant talent. Indian engineers, Chinese developers, Nigerian data scientists, Russian mathematicians. These people didn't just join the industry, they shaped it. They made it what it is, and now they are being discarded like temporary assets. Once the administration tightens its grip, companies say our hands are tied, it's federal policy, but I say no, that's a lie. Because the same tech giants who lobbied for tax cuts, who demanded regulatory loopholes, who found ways around every obstacle to grow their profits, they could fight harder for their people. They choose not to. Why? Because immigrant tech workers have been groomed to stay silent, to stay grateful, to feel like they are guests instead of shareholders. I've spoken to dozens of these workers, and let me tell you, many of them won't even post about their fear online. They worry it'll affect their employment. They worry it'll make them a target. They worry speaking up will speed up the process of being pushed out. And here's where the hypocrisy cuts deepest. These companies know their value. They hire these workers for their brilliance. They sponsor their visas because they're exceptional. And yet when the climate turns hostile, when Trump starts shouting about American jobs for American workers, these same companies become eerily quiet. They try to stay neutral. But there is no such thing as neutrality when people's lives are on the line. You are either standing up for your workers or you are standing with their oppressor. And let's not forget the government institutions themselves. The Department of Defense, NASA, national labs. So many of them rely on immigrant tech contractors, and yet this very government now pretends that these people are a threat, that they are leeches, that they are the enemy. Let me be clear, you cannot celebrate someone's mind and then criminalize their presence. You cannot praise their productivity and then penalize their existence. That's not leadership, that's exploitation. And here's what really makes me angry. The American economy is not suffering because of these workers, it's sustained by them. They fill critical gaps, they create jobs, they build startups that go on to employ hundreds of Americans. Every year, immigrants file thousands of patents, they contribute billions in tax revenue, they give back more often than they take. So when Trump points his finger and says they are the problem, he is not just lying, he is gaslighting the nation into ignoring its own dependence. And when the corporations nod quietly instead of pushing back, they become co-authors of the damage being done. It doesn't have to be this way. These companies could demand reform. They could put pressure on lawmakers. They could create emergency support funds
For workers affected by visa denial, they could amplify immigrant voices instead of burying them in NDAs and exit interviews. But until they do, the hypocrisy remains. Until they stop profiting from fear while pretending to stand for progress, we cannot take their slogans of inclusion seriously. And yet, amid all this betrayal, there is still something stronger than policy, still something more powerful than silence, and that is the will to fight. Because as these immigrants are pushed to the brink, many are not running. They are rising, they are organizing, they are saying you can take my visa but you cannot take my dignity. And that's what we must speak about next. The resistance, the refusal to be erased, the truth that cannot be silenced, no matter how many notices are delivered. Let's talk about that, because it's time to rise. That spark, that sacred human refusal to be diminished, is what ignites movements. It's what turns quiet pain into powerful change, and that's exactly what we're beginning to see now. In the face of fear, in the shadow of deportation notices and threats, tech workers, immigrant and American-born, are starting to rise together, not just with whispers of discomfort, but with the full weight of their voices, their platforms, and their courage. They are forming coalitions. They are speaking out. They are reclaiming their right to not just work in this country but to belong. Because when your back is against the wall, and they've taken everything but your voice, your truth becomes the most dangerous weapon you hold. That's what this resistance is rooted in. Not hate, not revenge, but truth. And truth always has a way of shaking the ground beneath power. I've sat with engineers who had been silent for years out of fear of visa revocation, out of fear of being branded ungrateful, who are now helping others navigate the system, offering legal resources, building support networks. These are people who were told to stay small, told to be grateful, told to keep their head down, and just work. But now they're lifting their heads up and looking this system dead in the eye. They're saying, I am not your silent statistic. I am not your pawn. And the beauty is, they're not alone. American-born colleagues are joining them. They're starting to see that the crackdown on tech workers isn't just an attack on immigrants, it's an attack on the future of innovation, the future of progress, the future of America itself. Because when you strip talent from the tech ecosystem, you don't just lose workers, you lose discoveries, you lose inventions, you lose the heartbeat of advancement. So people are resisting in all the ways they can. Some are refusing to accept job offers unless companies publicly support immigrant rights. Others are leaving jobs at firms that comply too easily with harmful federal policy. Some are launching their own startups in countries that value them, not because they want to leave but because they've been told too many times that they don't belong here. But let me tell you what makes me emotional in the deepest way. It's the ones who have every reason to flee, who have every right to say enough, but who choose instead to fight for a country that hasn't yet fully fought for them. That kind of loyalty, that kind of love, it's not weakness, it's strength, unshakable, radiant strength. There are now non-profit tech legal coalitions forming. Former visa holders who became citizens are stepping in to fund legal assistance for those still trapped in the web. Hackathons are turning into advocacy spaces. Tech conferences are hosting immigration panels. People who once felt voiceless are now at the podium, telling their stories, and oh, their stories. They are filled with grit, with heartbreak, with hope. They are America's stories, because resistance isn't just about marching in the street. It's also about telling the truth in spaces where lies have ruled for too long. It's about showing up, even when your hands are shaking. It's about saying, I am not a burden, I am not illegal, I am human, and I deserve dignity. And it is precisely that resistance that scares those in power. Because once the veil of silence is lifted, it becomes clear, these workers were never the problem. The problem is a system that thrives on exploiting their genius, then punishing their presence. And the more people wake up to that, the harder it becomes to keep the lie going. So yes, this moment is terrifying. Yes, the stakes are high, but make no mistake, the movement has begun. And it's not just about visas. It's not just about job security. It's about the soul of who we are as a country. Will we be a place that honors talent, welcomes hope, and protects the people who make us great? Or will we be a nation that chooses fear over fact, division over unity, and cruelty over compassion? I believe in the former. I believe in the power of people, especially those who have been told they don't matter, to rise up and change the narrative. I believe that even now in this darkness, a new light is being born, not just from protests or policy demands, but from the quiet, relentless bravery of people who say, "You cannot erase me." So if you are listening, if you are one of the workers, the allies, the employers, the policymakers, know this: the time for silence is, the time for sitting on the sidelines is over. It's time to choose, because history is being written right now, and the world is watching who we decide to be.